welcome to Culture Connection. We are welcoming a couple guests as we come in, so thank you for being here. We're super excited today because we're going live in a few places. We are live on Facebook, and we are recording this session as well, so you'll be able to catch it later on our website as well as in our CX Solutions Facebook group. So you guys have seen how excited I am over the last couple weeks. I've been advertising this all over the place. And I've been talking about it in every single webinar that we've had over the last, 4 months? I think we've had 4 months of webinars, and we've been talking about this one in every single one. We're super excited to have my guest today, Keith White, who's a dear friend, but also the Vice President of Community Engagement with Walmart. And I'll tell you a little bit more about him. We're just going to welcome a couple more people in. And again, thank you all for coming. Thank you for tuning in live. We appreciate you being here. So today we're going to talk about all things culture connection. So for those of you in business, you know the importance of creating and cultivating, culture of success, right? And when you've got happy employees, you've certainly got happy customers. And so this is one of the foundational principles to really make sure that you're providing a phenomenal customer experience by having that culture that feels like family, that culture that creates happiness and that really allows you to thrive, to be innovative, but most importantly, it feels good. It just feels good to come to work and to feel great about things. So we're gonna dive in, and I'm honored and privileged to have my guest today, Keith White. Keith, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, so glad to be here.
Yeah, and so if I'm going to give you a little kudos and tap on the back, my friend. Like I said, Keith is Vice President of Community Engagement and Support with Walmart. He's a change management leader. He's been the past president of Cub Foods with Super Value, as well as the past president of U.S. operations at Pitney Bowes, the VP of Sales, and so he's led operations across North America, really. Keith, when we first met, you were in Canada, actually. And
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And he's also the author of a great book called Good Is Not Enough. And I've got my copy. I should have had my copy right behind me, but I've definitely got a copy in the corner, as well as a keynote speaker. So Keith, thank you so much for being here. And we're really privileged to have you.
And I'm excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you. And so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Crystal DeCuna. I'm the Chief Experience Officer with the Inside View. I've had an opportunity to do a lot of they say I have a PhD in people skills. My PhD really comes from my love of the Disney Institute and Tony Robbins, John Maxwell, some really great leaders out there, but really my passion for leading customer experience, and have had an opportunity to lead some great sales teams by not focusing on the sale, but by really focusing on the experience to the employees as well as their customers. And any given Sunday, you can find me on the football field outside of this global pandemic that we're all in. I'm cheering for my son on the field, so I'm definitely a football mom, but I appreciate everybody being here today. And so without further ado, we're kind of going to dive in a little bit. We have the Inside View is hosting this webinar today, as you know, but we've launched a phenomenal program. It's called Customer Experience Mastery. And so this program, we've been teaching this for 5 years, but with the I guess how we've pivoted during this pandemic is we've been able to create it online, but with a lot of interactive and engaging components. So we really believe that these are the foundational principles to create customer experience excellence within your organization. And so when we dove deep into, okay, what are the competencies? What is the non-negotiable things we need to really cultivate a culture of success within an organization? We dove it down to these 7 things. We need to be really, really clear on our vision, but not just clear on the vision or the mission statement, but really how are we going to be able to practice that on a daily basis within our organization, right? How do we live it and breathe it? And how do we design that kind of culture around our vision and mission? Design to delight is one as well. Sorry, after Vision Vitals, it's Lovesick Leadership. So with Lovesick Leadership, we want to make sure that your leaders in your organization are lovesick about pushing people forward, about developing the people that they have. Often we find leaders are put into positions of leadership, maybe perhaps through succession planning or because it's the next step, but never really understanding their role as a leader to be able to, that it's to be able to cultivate a culture and to be able to inspire others. So lovesick leadership is one of the main steps. Then we get into culture connection, which I'll come back to in a minute. Design to delight is where we, how do you create that Disney experience for your staff as well as for your customers? So how does it get designed? And we use some innovative tools like customer journey mapping and design thinking in that particular step. Then we come to trusting top talent, which is all about, do we hire the right people? And once we hire the right people, how do we keep them happy? How do we make sure that, if you're hiring top talent, they have top expectations. Would you agree, Keith?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, when you're hiring that top talent, first of all, we can't hire the way we've always hired. We got to do things a little bit differently to attract the right people to our team. And when we do them a little bit differently, we want to make sure that we are a really we're aligning our expectations with what they expect as well as what we expect, and we're able to really create a synergy there. So we spend a lot of time on trusting top talent. It's certainly a foundational principle. Then we talk about sales and service mastery, and when we talk about sales and service mastery, it's interesting because for the last 5 years as we operated the business, my number one call I get is, hey Crystal, we need some help with sales, we need some help with service. And as much as that's a vital sign of the organization, it's not the first sign, right? To create those sales and create that excellence in service, we have to go back to the vision, the lovesick leadership, the culture, all those other pieces. Then comes the sales. And so we talk about how to have a sales process and what's important in that, kind of aligning your sales and service expectations so that you're not working in silos within organizations. Everybody's committed to that same sales process. And then lastly, any great organization has to have a practice of coaching, right? How do we coach people to develop further? And so today we're going to dive right into culture connection, which is one of our 7 steps to customer experience mastery. And for those of you just tuning in, over the last several months, actually, we have done a webinar on each one of those steps. So you can go ahead and check them out if you want to. We'll give you reference to them at the end of this webinar. But today, as we dive into culture connection, I thought who better than to chat with Keith and share a little bit about kind of the culture and the best practices that Walmart has got up their sleeve. But also, Keith, you come from a great background. I'm sure there's stories within other organizations that you'd love to share with us. And so I think if this is the first kind of question that I thought, this will provoke some great conversation. And so you can have all the right strategies in the world, but if you don't have the right culture, your organization is dead. How do you feel about that, my friend?
I am a big proponent of that because, again, you hear the phrase all the time that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Phil Drucker said that. But I can tell you that it can also be a great competitive advantage. And I'll go back many years when I was with IBM. And this is back in the 80s. And IBM, to this day is still known as a IT juggernaut and, the cream of the crop. But I'll tell you a little secret. Back in the 80s, IBM did not always have the best, fastest equipment, right? There was Dell, there was HP, there were other companies, many of which were not even around anymore, who actually had faster, cheaper equipment. But the culture at IBM was such that the focus was on the customer and making whatever we needed to make work for the customer. And so while you could have gotten a faster box somewhere else, you could not get the hands-on culture of IBM, making sure you're successful and, for lack of a better term, holding your hand along the way. And then there was just a pride of knowing that we had a culture that said we would get it right. And so if we made an installation and, it wasn't living up to expectation, we didn't just walk away. And so that was a culture that even though our products were, always great, but they were never always the top in each category, we were able to grow that company. And now it's a monumental company with services and solutions, but culture is important. When you think about today, and today's retail environment in particular, culture is everything. I got into the grocery retail business, Crystal, back in 2009. And it was at a time when, for years, all you had was that local grocery store. Most people shop within 2 miles of their home. Well, all of a sudden, you look around, and gas stations are selling food, drugstores are selling groceries, and so grocery stores had to realize we have to do something about the shopping experience, the customer experience, to differentiate who we are. And so again, culture is important. You can have the best products, best service, but if your culture isn't customer centric, if it isn't a culture that enhances and enables and empowers their associates to do and be their best, you won't realize that return on investment.
So Keith, tell me then a little bit, phenomenal, really, I think it's a basis of organizations. And often, we work with a lot of small, medium businesses. And so I often get that question, like, Crystal, well, that's for the big guys, right? The big people the Walmarts, the Disneys, the Facebooks of the world, they have the budgets and the time and the strategies to really be able to create great culture. And I'm not of that belief system. And I believe you're along the same lines as well. But I'd love to know, like, what is specifically at IBM or any of your organizations that you've worked with was really did it take a lot of time or money, or what was the foundation of really creating that culture that was infectious and that was engaging?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it's a misnomer to think that just because a company's large, that it's easier for them to create culture. It's actually harder, because I'll use Walmart as an example. There are about 5,000 different Walmart and Sam's Clubs. And each one of them, believe it or not, has their own micro culture that's a part of it, right? And so it's much easier when you're a small company. So think of a Walmart store as kind of a small company, right? It is. And what happens is it starts with the leadership in that store. And so, the small business owner, it starts with your leadership. Do you create a culture where, for example, people can question why we do what we do? Do you create a culture where suggestions are, here's a way we could think about doing this? I've worked for companies where it was their way. There was no room for, insight or input or a better way. And I've also worked for companies, I'll use IBM as an example, where if you found a way to make a product better or to save money, the company would implement it, and you would actually get a percentage of the savings or the increased revenue. And so that created a culture of innovation, right? If I know that if I find a way to save money on shipping, that a certain percentage of that will come back to me personally, I'm going to always be looking for ways to make things better. And so when you think about a small business, you are in fact the culture champion of that store, that business, that community, and you set the tone. And it could be something as simple as customers coming first. You'll hear me talk about the Walmart cheer, right? And one thing I realized, Walmart started out as a small company, and it's smart. Sam Walton, just a genius. And to this day, every day at a Walmart store, you'll hear that Walmart cheer. And the ending of it is, who's number one? The customer, always. Imagine every day, 3 times a day, that message is being delivered. It becomes ingrained into you.
Yeah, and I mean, anybody that shopped at Walmart has probably been around when those cheers go on, and I love the energy. You feel it. You can hear the little huddle in the back of the store, in the front of the store, wherever it is. Usually, it's kind of in a public area, which is kind of nice because people hear it, customers hear it, right? And I often find that that's a challenge with small business, and I don't know if it's the mindset or if it's the fear, but one of our practices at the Inside View is we create this daily huddle. So the focus is to be able to spend 8 minutes as a team virtually, especially in our new reality, whether it's virtually or whether it's in person, but you spend 8 minutes planning your 8-hour day. Walmart doesn't even close in some places, but 8 minutes planning your 8-hour day, because, often we plan 365 days a year we're working, and we could take 3 months to plan our strategic plan for like the next year. Well, why can't we spend 8 minutes planning and executing and strategizing as a team what our 8 hours looks like? And so in that daily huddle that we put together for organizations, it's a phenomenal way to create really great communication. When we have really great communication within organizations, it's strengthened. That's usually one of the number one challenges is, hey, Crystal, we're just, the right hand's not talking to the left hand. We're working in a lot of silos, but when you're able to have that little huddle for that 8 minutes, it kind of creates this foundation of communicating and forgetting the 10 million emails that we're sending to each other. Let's just ask, hey, can you come here at this time today? Can we pound this out? I know Noah, one of my team members, is on the call today, and we meet every day, but we keep it to that 8-minute mark, right? So it's not a long meeting every day. It's 8 minutes. You start, you get through the solutions, and then you cheer and you celebrate your successes. But that is really kind of the whole idea, where it doesn't cost a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of time.
Not at all. And the thing about the huddles, and we do them 3 times a day typically,
Mm-hmm.
but is it creates great alignment, right?
Yeah.
So that everyone knows what the priorities are for that day in the store. You know, if it's the week of Halloween, here's what we're doing, but you do it every day and you include multiple folks. So for example, you know, in retail, I always say that the cashiers or the checkout experience is really that moment of truth, because you could have a great shopping experience and get to the checkout, but if it's not fast, if they're not friendly, it can color the whole trip. And so it's important, you know, in our world, to make sure that the cashiers understand how important their role is and how it really feeds into the bigger success of what we're trying to accomplish. But those huddles are worth it's worth every minute of it to make sure that we're aligned, that we're on message, and that we're singing from the same hymn.
And so that brings me to kind of the next question then, Keith, is, you know, we're living in a new reality here. I know, where in the world are you today? I know last time we spoke, are you in, where are you in the States today?
Today, I'm in Albany, New York. I think we
Okay.
spoke last time. I was in Chicago. I could be
Chicago,
in
yeah.
Bentonville. I could be all over.
That's why I asked, because I know you're all over. And so, you know, in this new reality that we're in, this virtual world, now not all operations are virtual, certainly. There's a lot of combination between virtual and in person, especially those in the retail environment. You know, there's a kind of that double edge. But how do we really, you know, what is it going to take to create some cultural success, and really lead culture of success within today's new reality? You know, we're using a lot of different tools, but often, you know, people are finding it a little bit challenging to be, you know, online all day or zoomed out, as they say, right? And so what are your tips there, and how do you feel that you can kind of continue to build culture?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I have to tell you that, you know, I had more Zoom calls in the last 6 months than I've had in probably 6 years prior to that.
Yeah.
But it's important that you still keep those lines of communication open, even more so in a virtual world. So to be successful in leading in this virtual culture, this new reality, it's making sure that you have, you know, what I call specific touch points, be it throughout the week or out the month, where you sit down with that person or that team. And again, you go over, it's kind of like that huddle. Here are the things that we're focused on. But you have to be mindful not to overindulge. And what I mean by that is that from an attention span perspective, you know, anything more than an hour Zoom is really too long for most people, right? And so you have to make sure that your meetings, you know, have agendas, that they're purposeful. And so, you know, we found out once we got on Zoom that we were wasting a lot of time in meetings doing things that really didn't add value. And so we repurposed our meetings. We looked at, okay, you know, no meeting without an agenda, right?
Right.
No meeting without here are the outcomes. And we would reduce significantly the amount of time we were on calls. And so I think it's making sure that, one, you keep the main thing, and that people are still aware of what the vision is, what the goal is, and that you're communicating progress against the goal. Whereas before you might have been in the same office, now you have to do it through reports or through calls. But making sure to keep everyone connected on the mission, and getting readouts on where we are in the mission. So let me give you a Walmart example. We're getting ready to go into the holiday season with Black Friday and Christmas, right? And so it's very important now that the merchant team, which orders the products, working with the supply chain folks who are delivering it, to the retail operators who are selling it, right? And that we're all aligned so that, you know, I know when the trucks are coming, you know, and those types of things. So it's really important that, you know, you make sure that you keep those lines of communication open formally, but everybody has to be on the same page.
Right. And I mean, I think you just mentioned that, there's so many things you mentioned in there, but I think it's really important to be able to understand that, you know, when you're really cultivating this culture of success, it's that communication line is so important, and it's how we're communicating. Lately, we've been doing a lot of virtual team building, and it's interesting because, you know, people are holding these end of year conversations, or these end of year what are they, like strategy planning sessions, and they could be 2 or 3 hours. And so we've been having some good conversations with people to say, listen, what about taking half an hour and talking about something totally non-business related, taking an hour and talking about something totally non-business related? Because what's happening also, we're finding, is that organizations are getting so focused on what you just mentioned, the outcomes and what's going to happen within that hour. Great, because you want to know what's going to happen in an hour, but that water cooler talk, that opportunity to build relationships with people before the meetings, after the meetings, that gets lost in our new virtual reality, right? And we don't have those opportunities. So can we create some opportunities for people to be able to just have an hour of fun, right? Just be able to have some conversation with each other and get to know each other a little bit better. And so with our virtual team building, it's been quite fun, where, you know, we just did one with a large brewery here in our Niagara region, and they had a 4-hour session. But out of the 4-hour session, they broke it up. They put an hour in, and it just almost re-energized them, right? To think a little bit differently, to get innovative, to think on. We talked a lot about critical thinking in that team building session, and I think it's important as well to somehow incorporate those elements of fun into our everyday, especially when we're talking about cultivating a culture. Often we think about kind of that frontline staff, but sometimes we forget that middle level manager, those executive managers, they need that inspiration, they need that team building, they need that culture piece too, right? Keith, I'm sure you can speak to that. You've got a large.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I have 3 other peers who do some similar work, and probably once every 2 weeks we have, for lack of a better term, a virtual happy hour.
Right.
And it's really a time frame, and it's usually after work for about an hour or so, where we just talk about life, family, kids, what have you, because we realize that it's really important, particularly in the times of isolation, of pandemics and those that we really embrace holistically who we are, right? And so and it really brought us closer together, because those are things that typically we wouldn't talk about, right? So the last one was right before my daughter's wedding, and so I spent probably about 15 minutes complaining about this wedding that I had to go to. But again, it provided that outlet, and it also provided a connectivity point, because at the end of the day, it's about people, right? And we have so much more in common than we realize. And so having that opportunity to take a break from the business, and let the dog bark, let the kid get in the back of the Zoom video. I mean, those moments are priceless.
Yeah, we're finding that a lot. And we've been doing also a lot of like almost lunch and learn opportunities, where people are like, okay, listen, we know your days are jam packed, but we want you to grab your lunch. Or some organizations are even, sending lunch to their people, saying, hey, at 12 o'clock, you're going to get lunch, put your orders in. So they're using these cool new methodologies. We have the Uber Eats and all these DoorDash and all these type of things to be able to make sure that people are still experiencing that lunch and learn opportunity, or those dinner meetings that we're having as well. But then they hop online, and we're able to have really great conversation on up-leveling their skill set. So again, one we did was on critical thinking. One we did was we do customer experience ones all the time. But it's just, what I'm finding is that it really allows people to stop thinking business for a moment and learn and do something fun. But then we were able to debrief it and relate it back to that business skill, right? That competency, the skill set that they need, leadership, sales, whatever the case may be. But just being able to kind of think different. One of the fun ones we've been doing, it's probably our most popular one, is called Life in a Cabin. And so we collect people, we allow people to, it's totally related to anything that people are typically doing within their organization. But we say, okay, we're gonna have this exercise, and we're gonna talk about like life in a cabin. What would life be like in a cabin? And so we pose a couple of interesting questions, and then we put them into breakout rooms. We give them a couple of things that they need to be able to use to solve the problem that we're facing. And then they come back, and oh my gosh, the answers you get, you would think it would be a simple answer. You would think it would be, but the conversations and the energy and the laughter that you get from these sessions are really quite fun. We've done another one where we've sent people Lego. And so we've kind of packaged these little Lego pieces, and they all got Lego pieces. And then while we were on the virtual team building, and this was with an executive team, by the way, so a team that's not used to like playing. You know what I mean? Like very, very
Right, right.
logical thinkers, very administrative thinkers. We sent them Legos, and then when we get online, one of the cool things is we actually give them an image. So all the different groups in this particular one, we had 5 groups, and every person in a group got a different picture of the image that we're trying to build with the Lego. So for example, somebody got a top view, somebody got a side view, somebody got a front view, and one person had all the Lego pieces and they had to build it. And so it allowed you to see kind of how a challenge from one person who's actually solving the challenge looks so different than the different perspectives, right? They're all guiding and leading people, but they can't see each other's pictures. So they really have no idea what angle they're looking at, right? And so it's just
Oh
fun
man.
for an executive or for a leadership team to kind of dive in and play with Lego. And at the end of it, we were able to share kind of that debrief on, hey, we got to be able to look at things from different perspectives if we want to continue to create, really great culture, really great meetings, really great innovation kind of going forward. So just, I think that's really important for businesses to know that have fun, right? Like have that virtual fun with people as well.
Absolutely. And again, it will also increase engagement, right? Associate,
Mm-hmm.
people who are, make work fun, they're more engaged and less likely to, leave and those types of things. So I really think it's also a nice engagement strategy.
For sure, for sure. My next question, Keith, is more around diversity and inclusion. I'm a huge advocate when it comes to diversity and inclusion. We recently launched, actually, we've had this course for about 5 years now, but it's a hot topic in the world today in our global crisis that we're in. And so diversity and inclusion has been something that we've been passionate about for a long time, but now we've taken it online. And we've created a certification program that's doing really well, and we're excited about it. But I'd love your input on how diversity and inclusion, what kind of impact that has on corporate culture, and really what that means to you. You shared a couple stories with me earlier that I thought are really fantastic about how diversity and inclusion plays such an important part in that. So tell me your thoughts on how it plays a part in the culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge in some cultures or some industries more so than others. So, you think about retail in particular, it has to be and needs to be a very diverse and inclusive culture because our customer base is diverse and inclusive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, the first thing I find is that when you have a diverse workforce and you're inclusive, you get lots of good ideas that generate up. I'll share a funny story with you. When I was in Minneapolis, I ran Cup Foods. And Minneapolis is not the most diverse town, but there's a significant Black population. And it was Thanksgiving week, and I went to one of our stores in the north side of Minneapolis, which is predominantly Black, and there was no sweet potato pies. It was only pumpkin pie, right? And I went to the store manager, and I said, well, where are your sweet potato pies? And he goes, well, we don't sell those here. I said, well, why not? He said, well, they love pumpkin pie. And I said, well, we have a recipe for it, right? He goes, yeah. I said, well, tell you what, on this Saturday, why don't we make 100 sweet potato pies, 100 pumpkin pies, price them the same, put them next to each other, and then give me a call Monday, let me know how things are going. He called Saturday afternoon. He said, how did you know? I said, how did I know what? That the sweet potato pies really sell. I said, again, it's just that cultural awareness, right? I happen to know that, for Blacks and African Americans in this country, sweet potato pie over indexes on pumpkin pie. But again, it's those types of things. It's about having different perspectives, right? When I look at, our feminine hygiene products, or I look at women's clothing, I'm not the right person for that. There need to be people on the team who can speak to that. When I look at young men's clothes, I'm an old man. We need young people on the team. And so the more diverse and inclusive you are, really the biggest benefit is to the company. And I have to stop and say there's a difference between diversity and inclusiveness,
Very
right?
much.
Diversity really just means that you have multiple representations, right? Be it, sexual orientation, race, gender, what have you. Inclusiveness is that there's a sense of belonging, appreciation. People, are safe to kind of be who they are, and they feel included. They feel like they are part of the organization as opposed to just being in the organization.
I couldn't agree with you more. When I think about diversity and inclusion, a great example I always say is it's one thing to be invited to the dance, but it's a completely different thing to be actually asked to dance, right? And so that's really, diversity is about, okay, we're inviting new people to this group, but we got to be able to make sure we are giving them the opportunity to share their thoughts with us as well. And that's kind of that marriage, that perfect synergy between diversity and inclusion. And you provoked the thought for me is, I remember hearing from one of the leaders at Dairy Queen about how they started to move into the Asian market. And so they moved into the Asian market, and you know, they're trying to sell their dipped ice cream cones and their blizzards like they do here in North America. And they soon found out that no, they need that green tea ice cream, because that green tea ice cream is what was, you know, green tea is such a popular flavor there. And so they had to pivot completely. I think about a Disney story where Disney opened in Europe, and you know, Disney and alcohol would never be a thing that would be served here in North America, but in Europe it's part of their culture is to have a glass of wine. And so they had to figure out ways to be able to incorporate, you know, that dining experience, because dining is such a huge part of the Disney experience, into that European culture. And they adjusted. When they went to Hawaii, they actually enlisted some of the locals from Hawaii to name the Disney resorts in Hawaii. And so, you know, they were part of the naming ceremonies and part of the cultural alignment. And so I think it's really important to keep that diverse perspective when you're going into different cultures. But one thing I'd like to share when it comes to diversity and inclusion is that it's not even about, I think we often kind of first think of it when it comes to race and religion and maybe gender equality, like those are the first things that come to it. But it's so much bigger than that. Like, you know, you're talking about abilities and
Absolutely.
disabilities, right? Like it's bigger than just those top couple things that we think about. It's such a wide variety of ways that we can
It's
be.
really, if you think about it, it's diversity of experience,
Mm-hmm.
diversity of background, diversity of thought, you know, and that's what really drives innovation. When you bring different perspectives from different experiences and different backgrounds, you know, you see the world totally different, right? And so, you know, the great companies, large or small, they get that. You know, they understand that, you know, you're going to need some millennials with all these crazy apps and going on, but you're going to need some old guys like me too, because we have institutional knowledge. And so, you know,
Exactly.
it's one of those things where, you know, it brings out the best in all of us, and we all learn from each other.
For sure, for sure. And you know, in our the course that we've got, we do a lot of practical things where we allow people to say, hey, this is, you know, this is a module we've taught, but now I want you to take this and I want you to go have this discussion with your team. And we get calls back and we're like, Crystal, like that was such a thought provoking. We spent 4 hours on talking about that, because it was like they just started this conversation, and what they ended up actually doing was realizing that they had needed a whole new stream of product line for that particular customer. So it starts to really generate, well, in this case, in this one organization that's taking it, they're developing new products because of these diversity conversations. So, you know, and
Yeah.
also, go ahead, sorry.
No, it's so important, and it plays out in the workplace too. I think there was a story I shared with you. You know, I used to run stores in Philadelphia for Walmart,
Mm-hmm.
and there's, you know, an area called Aramingo, and it's, you know, heavily African American. It's poor, it's poverty stricken. But 2 years ago, that store was named Store of the Year at Walmart, and people say, well, how did that happen? And surely there had to be a black leader in that store. Well, actually, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was an Asian American gentleman who understood customer satisfaction, understood associates. This gentleman realized he wasn't black, but what he would do every day was eat his lunch in the lunchroom with the associates, and he would never talk about business. It would be their family, their interests, share some of his things back and forth. And over a year's time, he took that store from one of the worst in the company to one of the best, with the same team, same customers, because he created a culture of inclusion. He created a culture of knowing the customers. He would know customers by name. I'd be amazed and say, how do you know all these customers? He says, every day from 4 to 6, whatever I do, I stop and I go to the checkouts and I start bagging groceries for the customer, finding out who they are, what they want, and those types of things. Nobody told him to do that. But those are the things that from a culture perspective, and again, from a diversity perspective, you find out that, hey, you know, we have a lot more in common than you think. But you know, it was just really eye-opening for us to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean that actually, there's so many thoughts around that as well. Is when you're able to immerse yourself within a culture, you're able to learn so much more. I always say, like, you can't score points, you know, you have to be in the paint, right? Like you have to kind of play in the paint
Yeah.
when you're talking about, you know, basketball or any sports analogy. It's like you got to be close to that goal line to be able to get to the goal. And so, if you can't really do it from your ivory tower, we need to really get within the organization. I also find that, when you're within an organization, oops, my earring just fell off. Wardrobe malfunction online. When you're within an organization, you want to be able to kind of listen to what people are saying. And so, we use a lot of, we use surveys, we use focus groups, we use all sorts of different elements to really measure how people are feeling at any given time, right? So once you understand kind of how they're feeling, you can also respond and really react that way as well. We've got a question. Sorry, go ahead.
But the key there though is you got to make sure that you listen. And what I mean by that, a lot of organizations that will hold a listening session, and if they hear things that they agree with, that's fine. If they hear negative things or things they don't agree with, they struggle. And so, the best leaders I've worked for, we have these what we call unvarnished truth sessions where, if the company rolled out an app and it's a dog, it's okay to say, hey, our customers say this app is a dog. A lot of cultures don't allow for that, right? But you don't get better without that.
Yeah.
Criticism. Feedback is a gift, and so the organizations that not only ask for it but receive it and act on it are the ones that really move the needle.
Yeah, and when we do focus groups for organizations, and now we've been doing virtual focus groups, that ability to have their staff. So we do them with internal staff as well as customers, but just that opportunity for people to be able to say things that, first of all, confidentially, I think is really important, right? Like give us the real truth on how you're experiencing this. The other part of a focus group is that, as opposed to a survey, you're getting that yes or no answer. You're also, if I'm creating a survey for an organization, I'm shaping kind of how I want those questions answered, right? There's only so much they can tell me. But when you have a focus group and you're able to get that information from them, it's so much more than just the answers on a survey. And it's also people that want to give you their opinion, people that want to continue to do business with you, right? And that want to see you succeed. So we find a lot of success in that. And it just gives you such an opportunity to say, hey, listen, let's be vulnerable for a minute and say, we're spending a lot of money on this. What can we, how can we make this better? Or is this even of value to our customers? Right? Is this even of creating value for our employees? Is this a huge challenge for our employees? And that's why it's not being perceived really great with our customers. I think that's one thing that we hear often is that, well, when we work it backwards and we go kind of 3 whys deep into, why are customers not satisfied? Well, because the employees are having a hard time with this. Well, then why? Well, then why? Well, then why? We go 3 to 5 whys deep. And it's amazing that it's rooted in, well, this is too difficult for the employees to do. It's too difficult for our team to execute, right? And so that's creating a negative culture.
It's either too difficult or they don't understand. And let me give you again another Walmart or another retail example. So, we are moving very quickly from a brick and mortar retail environment, in fact we have been, to a much more omni-channel presence. And so when I joined Walmart 5 years ago, they struggled with that e-commerce experience because that frontline associate still hadn't connected the dots on, hey, retail is changing. It's no longer just that 4 walls of that store. And so we're going to have to do other things. And so, they didn't embrace it. So when you come to pick up your groceries, maybe half the order was there, half of it wasn't. It wasn't until we really got into the hearts and minds of associates to help them understand this train has left the station. Customers will want to shop when they want, where they want, how they want. And you got to look at your role now, not as just someone who's selling in a brick and mortar store, but someone who's fulfilling from someone ordering online. And once we did that and got the associates online and on board and made them actually use the things. So that was the other thing. We said, hey, you got to order too, just so you can see how this all works. Our success rates, customer satisfaction went way up. But again, it's making sure they understand the why. And once they understand the why, they made the experience for the customer that much better.
Yeah, and from a user experience point of view as well, right? Customers are experiencing things so differently. They're shopping with us, and you mentioned omni-channel. It's kind of my favorite word because it's such an important piece of where customers are coming in from. But people, like I said in the beginning, people often call me and say, Crystal, we need help with our sales. We need help with our sales. But it's not about the sales. It's thinking about how everything aligns with that. And when the culture piece is people are able to say, okay, what does the user experience look like online? How easy is it for people to give you their money online? And now with our new way of doing things, um, there may be a lot of glitches, and your employees and your team need to go through it and purchase things and be given those opportunities to make the purchases of different products, or make the purchases of different services, whatever the case may be. But they need to go through that experience to understand where the pain is, understand where that challenge is, and then they need to be able to feel comfortable sharing that, then saying, hey, listen, this is where this is why things $500 worth of stuff is stuck in my cart, because I can't figure out the answers to these two questions, right? There's a couple of statistics out there where billions of dollars are stuck in people's shopping carts and they never purchase it because it's too difficult to actually make the purchase, right? I know PayPal was a big thing.
Yeah.
People can't purchase on PayPal. Sorry, Keith, were you guys?
Yeah, it's about user experience, Yeah, I remember when, we relaunched our website at Walmart a few years ago, and even the search engine part had to be thought about, because we could go in and type scope, and you would get everything from scope mouthwash to a rifle scope to, and so, you got to think about that customer experience end to end, right? And we stress tested obviously on a Black Friday type of event, so, again, what's that customer experience like? How does that customer feel when they hit the button for that big screen TV? And it goes from there to disappears. And so again, everything about the customer experience is even heightened in this whole pandemic, because right now, I think it really pushed forward the whole e-commerce movement years, because people who previously, like my 85-year-old mother who would never use e-commerce, had to go the e-commerce route to get her medicines, to get her, and so, it really forced and pushed e-commerce ahead, I'd say at least 5 years.
Right. Right. And so bringing that back to culture, we know that that's the way where our new reality is working. And so when it comes to culture, I think it's just important for our entire team to be able to know and be a part of those solutions, because if they're able to experience it firsthand, you're creating really great culture by allowing them, hey, we're going e-commerce, or hey, we're starting to do some new Facebook advertising, we're starting to do some more Instagram advertising, we're using these different mediums to be able to bring business to us. So we want you to go experience it, right? We want you to tell us what your thoughts are. And so what you're doing right there is, first of all, you're solving your challenges for sure, but most importantly, you're giving your people the opportunity to be a part of these solutions. And they also feel, they know that people know that we're changing and we're doing business differently, and so they feel like they're almost part of that grassroots of the change, right? Of that new reality that we're all living in. And so, Keith, when I think about culture, I'd love to know what would be 2, 3 your top strategies really in developing and engaging and thriving company culture. And I want you to kind of put this for you. I wouldn't say like money or time is no object, but I often say to my clients that if money or time was no object, what would you do? And often they come up with these great lists of things, if they had all the budgets in the world and all the time in the world, but none of them actually cost any money or time when they come up with these lists of things to do. And so I think it's a really big lesson for all of us, that it doesn't have to be about these big budgets and big time. It just has to be about being authentic. But what would you say are a couple of strategies to really thrive, create thriving cultures?
Crystal, you are so spot on. And here are 3 that have worked for me in my career. And again, I've been a change agent my entire career, working with companies like the Bell System before the breakup, IBM when it was transferring from a hardware and software to a service provider, and now in grocery. The first thing is be able to explain the why for what it is we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be able to explain the why at every level of the organization so that it makes sense to them. Right. So, the boardroom explanation about why Walmart had to go into the e-commerce space is a different conversation than when you talk to that associate. So here's a perfect example. When I was talking to my associates to get them to embrace this whole thing called e-commerce, I would play a little game with them. I said, hey, I came out of college in 1980 and I worked for the largest retailer in the world. Who was that? And most of them didn't know, but someone would say it was Sears. I said, absolutely. I said, and oh, by the way, Sears was really like Walmart and Target and Amazon before its time, because they had a store, but they also had a catalog business, right?
Mm-hmm.
I said, where are they at today? And well, they're almost out of business. I said, so how did they go from #1 retailer in the world to out of business in 25, 30 years? And I did that to say, hey, just because they didn't react to the change and the changing dynamics, Walmart has to be this, we have to do the exact opposite, or else we'll end up the same way. And so that was my way of getting them to understand why we needed to embrace e-commerce. I didn't go into the sales aspect of it. And it's just, hey, you want to stay in business, we got to do that. So first, explaining the why. Secondly, and this is equally important, connecting everybody to that vision to see where they fit in. And so when I talk about the customer experience, particularly in groceries, and I want that bagger to understand, or that cashier to understand, I tell them, hey, research has shown that a satisfied customer will put one more item in their shopping cart when they're shopping with you. And they say, okay, great. I said, well, let's think about that. If I multiply one item and say it's $5 times the number of customers, that's a lot of product that has to come in. That's a lot. I said, guess what? That means you get more hours. And oh, by the way, because you're that last, point of customer touch point, if you're smiling, if you're friendly, that customer is likely to buy more. It's a long story short, they realized the role that they played in Walmart being, this, great customer experience. If people don't see where they connect to the vision, it then becomes the boss's vision or the company's vision. But when they can see where they fit into that goal, when the guy bagging groceries realizes that he's more than just bagging groceries, when the guy who's our maintenance guys, when I explained to him that the number one thing that a customer looks for, and most of our shoppers, 80% are female, they want to know the store's clean. And they will judge the store by how bathrooms clean. And I mean, those types of things he can connect himself to, or she can connect themselves to. Here's the importance of my role. It really helps push culture. And then the last thing is, and this is a tough one for companies, you have got to provide a feedback mechanism to hear the unvarnished truth. Sometimes we roll out things or do things that just aren't working. And, we can't be afraid to have an associate or a customer come back and say, hey, I know you thought this was a great idea, but let me tell you why, going to all self-checkouts isn't the best thing, right? And you got to be open to have those conversations, because if people aren't open or free to have unvarnished truth conversations, you really never get the full breadth of what it is you're trying to do.
Great points. Great point. Actually, for feedback, I think of a tool that we use. It's called Office Vibe, and it allows us to have our finger on the pulse of how our employees are feeling at any given time. It also asks for feedback, but it's so important for them to be able to say, hey, listen, we know you spent hundreds and whatever money on this program, but here's a couple of the glitches. And often fear gets in the way, but we got to be able to allow them the opportunity to tell us, because that hundreds of thousands of dollars could be a waste, and we could be missing out. And to your other story about, adding one more cart, I just took notes here. I worked with Danier Leather for 15 years. They were my retail giant that I just absolutely loved. Large leather retailer here in Canada, Keith. And so we had Yeah, I'm pretty sure you did. And so here we had, we had 1 year where things were just not so hot, and we didn't have a great year. And we thought, okay, well, how are we going to be able to do this? And it was as simple as saying, listen, if we can add one pair of gloves and one skincare package to every single transaction, we will be able to make our company targets. And this was when recession was going on. There's a lot of crazy things, and luxury leather was not necessarily top of mind for people. And so by adding just one pair of gloves and one skincare product, it was like a $50 upcharge, which was improving the customer's life, right? You're still improving. I mean, what's the good of having a warm jacket if your hands are freezing cold, right? And what's the point of having a jacket that, you can't take care of, and you needed that skincare products to make sure we could take care of it. So the products were certainly not, you're not selling somebody something they don't need. You're selling something that's still going to improve their life and their experience with the product. But we were able to hit our targets that year. And we actually, when you go to the why, we actually took a trip that year because we were able to do it, right? So the why was kind of, for them, it was about achieving that goal and achieving that success of a trip. But it was about showing them that, hey, listen, guys, we want to be able to make sure we get on this trip, or we want to be able to make sure we can give you these bonuses. And so let's work backwards. The bonuses affect your family. The trip is improving your own self-care, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
But I think it's really important to kind of start with the why and say, let's come together, and how can we do this? And actually, the gloves and the care package idea was somebody from an internal staff member says, well, instead of just selling the products individually, why don't we put the care packages in a box and put a bow on it and saying here, right? So instead of one product for $10, it was 3 products for $30, little things like that. But allowing them the opportunity to be a part of that conversation was really helpful. And so I'll share a couple of the strategies that I'm thinking of when we kind of got talking about this. If I can think of my top 3 strategies, would really be, number one would be to be intentional about designing to delight. All too often we focus on the customer experience and designing what that customer experience looks like, right? From that omni-channel experience to the user experience. But I think we need to design to delight our employee experience. So, in one of our earlier webinars, we talked a lot about trusting top talent. Well, from the hiring process to the onboarding process to the 5 years or 10 years that they're with us or however long they're with us, that needs to be carefully designed and crafted. And we use a lot of tools called journey mapping, and there's tons of tools out there. But I think it's really important to be able to actually understand, like, listen, if we're attracting these top talented people, they have an expectation of our culture. And so we need to make sure that culture is intentionally designed to be exciting, be engaging, live up to their expectations of what they expect of our organization, right? Because if we're just looking for warm bodies to do work, well, then there's a different level of expectation. But we're looking for engaged employees. We're making sure it starts with that hiring process to make sure that they're the right people for their culture, right? And so we're not just looking for people to
Absolutely.
do the work. We're looking for people who are highly motivated and self-motivated to be able to say, okay, even though I'm sweeping the floor, I'm going to do it with pride, right? It goes back to that old saying of they have to really care about their work. So that's one. And the other one would be, I talked a little bit about diversity and inclusion in the session today, and I think that's a huge part of culture. And when I think of it, I put it on a different lens. So I've come with a lot of organizations, and working here, and we're from Niagara, and so Niagara Falls, Canada area, and so it's not a highly diverse population here. When I say diverse, I mean, like, from a cultural standpoint, it's not highly diverse. And so, we go an hour outside of Toronto and it's a mecca of diversity. It's a melting pot of diversity. And so I think it's really important, though, to be able to understand from diversity inclusion perspective of, how can we make sure that we are incorporating diverse perspectives within the organization and seeing how it really affects the culture. But what I mean by that is, if there's one person in an organization who maybe celebrates, a different holiday. Well, in North America here, we really celebrate, the Thanksgivings and the Christmases and the Easters, and that's kind of it. And it's wrong, right? Like, from a diversity and inclusion perspective, we want to be able to celebrate everybody's culture. We want to be able to celebrate what's important to everybody. And I think it's a really easy fix to be able to be a bit aware of what people in your organization celebrate as a culture. And, can we give it to them as a holiday? Because that's their holiday. Can we give it to them as can we celebrate with them? Can they maybe help us to learn why it's so important, right? So whether it's a holiday, whether it's a tradition, we have a lot of family traditions. In my family, we're East Indian. We have a lot of family traditions. And so I've been able to share those with other organizations, and then they incorporate things like that into their culture. So I think it's just being open-minded. And again, going back to inviting them to the dance and asking them to the dance, right? Asking people to be able to, hey, share a little bit about that culture with us, or share a little bit about that holiday, or that thing you're celebrating, right? There's so many, or the challenge that you're having, as we know all there's such turmoil going on in the world right now around race and religion. So, can you share with us how we can be a part of that solution, right? So I think it's just about opening it up to not being what we've been doing for the last decades, right? And to be able to open up to other cultures and other religions. And the last point
we saw that play out.
Go ahead.
So we saw that play out this year with the whole Juneteenth celebrations, right? So
yes.
At least in this country, that was not something that, most of my white colleagues even had heard of. And so, this year there was a lot of extra focus on that and awareness. So again, to your point, those things really help to create a culture of inclusiveness and belonging.
Well, it's interesting. So people often ask me, like, so I think it was Ramadan, and I had posted a thing on my Facebook saying, happy Ramadan to my friends. and people were wishing me a happy Ramadan. And I said, well, thank you, but I'm Christian. I'm just, I'm Christian. I don't celebrate Ramadan, but I celebrate for my friends, right? Or Diwali or Holi, which are Hindu celebrations. I'm East Indian. People often assume that I'm, Hindu, or I celebrate those days. And I do celebrate with my people, but I'm Christian, right? So it's interesting how people just kind of perceive things, and it has nothing to do with what I'm celebrating. It's just because I'm celebrating with others. So that's an interesting one. And the last point I would say is ask, involve, and implement. And again, this is a strategy that we use in culture design, but it's one thing to ask your employees or your team for their feedback or for their survey results, but it's another thing to involve them in the solution and actually implement them. There's nothing worse than getting those survey results, and I've seen this with hundreds of organizations, where you get the survey results and nobody's accountable or championing actually improving those survey results. So we get the results, they sit on a pile of papers for months upon end, and maybe perhaps an executive team might say, okay, well, 6 months from now, let's talk about what we can do to change this, right? Where are those challenges? And it's so important. When we ask for feedback, when we ask for their input, we have to involve them in the solutions, and we have to be able to create an implementation and action plan that doesn't take months upon months upon months or years to actually implement, but takes, a plan, and they're involved in the plan. So they see how long and the time that it takes to execute certain things. But I think that's a really important part, is when we ask for their feedback, we have to be able to implement some solutions when you're designing a really great company culture. Anything else,
that's
my
the
friend?
worst thing you can do is ask. The worst thing you can do is ask for feedback and then not take any action. And the other thing I try and tell organizations, when you do things, you mentioned do it with the associates. Associates always say, I don't like when a company's doing things to me. I like when they do things with me, and making them a part of the solution. So I think that's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we've got a couple minutes left. Keith, thank you so much. Your input has been phenomenal today. We've got a few guests online here. I'd love to open it up for questions. John and Kendra, I know you've been online. I'd love to know your thoughts, your feedback, if you've got any questions for us. Noah, how's the chat looking? Do we have any questions coming in from there? I'll give you a couple minutes. John and Kendra, if you have any questions, go ahead, my friends.
Hi, Keith and Crystal. Thanks very much. Very interesting. I love the examples. They were great. If you were to take a look at the business today at Walmart and wanted to improve the culture, you talked about a number of examples, but if you look holistically at the organization, what would you suggest is the major focus going forward to be able to improve the culture? The one thing. What is it that you would have to focus on organizationally?
I think the one thing we'd have to focus on more organizationally is understanding our different customer segments and how they like to be served. And we're just learning that. We're getting better at it as we go along. But it's one of those things, because if you think about Walmart, it's a company of long tenured associates. And so you go to a Walmart store and there's folks who've been there 20, 30. There was a guy yesterday celebrating 50 years. And so they grew up in a culture that was, a totally different culture. And so I think it's trying to help, everyone understand the new ways of working, helping everyone understand, again, that we're probably never going to go back to retail the way it was, and just focusing in on every aspect of that customer experience, from the time he or she hits the parking lot at the store level to the time he or she hits the website to buy online. What is that experience like? And making sure that we put ourselves in the shoes of the customer. So one of the things I did, John, at my stores was I made every one of my associates, I asked, and they did, to get the Walmart app and become proficient in it. Because if they get proficient in it, they could help customers understand, and they could understand what the experience was like. And so always leaning into the customer experience and understanding what it's like for them and trying to better that experience.
Great, thank you. I think I was just add one thing, Crystal, just on a personal level, I find my wife has taken advantage of the grocery pickup at Walmart over the last 6 months. And one of the things that's interesting about that is it actually creates a whole different sense of customer experience versus going into the store itself. It's a very different experience, and It's one of the things I like about it. It's extremely effortless, and it sounds very silly, but it's a little thing. But you know, if people don't know how the service works, you order online, you get an appointment, you go, you park in a certain spot, you call in, and someone comes out from Walmart and puts the groceries in your car. The interesting thing that it's a little thing, but it's actually quite interesting, is that I can spend my whole time sitting in that car, not having to get out. Other than I will open up the back door. We have an SUV, and then when they finish, they'll actually close. They'll ask if I want the door closed, which I always thought was kind of a funny thing, but it was actually a really nice touch. And so I'm able to basically get the service without having to get out of the car, which I think is kind of an interesting little angle on customer experience, which I'm quite surprised how nice I like it, which is bizarre. But anyhow, it's interesting when you think of examples. That's one to me is just an interesting one.
Those little touches that make all the difference.
And what's interesting, John, about that is that, you know, you think we want people to go in the store because typically when you go into a Walmart store, you'll always buy things that you didn't intend to buy, right? When you go in. So, you know, the grocery pickup experience, what we found is people are so satisfied with it that, you know, they may not get that extra item that day, but they'll do an extra trip because it's just kind of effortless. So great call out.
Yeah. Thank you.
And actually, to that point, the other thing, I'm going to back up just 1 second, John. You mentioned, what's the one thing? I would add, I would also try to measure culture, which I think often people have a challenge with. Okay, how do we measure this culture? What does success look like in cultivating a culture of success? There's a lot of phenomenal measurement tools out there that we can use to be able to kind of get our finger on the pulse on how our people are feeling. Because the happier our people are, the happier our customers are going to be, right? So just that would be my one take is let's start to put some measurement practices into it. It's not as easy to measure as did we make our sales numbers or not. It's definitely much more emotionally intelligent. It takes a lot of different kind of strategies, but what does success actually look like within a culture? Because it's such a feel-good type of thing. So if we can put some measurements and tangible measurements and make those measurements a part of our KPIs that we measure and we look at on a regular basis, right? That would be my one take for sure.
Thank you. I've got to run. I apologize, but it was great session. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we'll wrap things up. Keith, thank you so much, my friend, for being my guest today. And I appreciate you so much. And you shared some really great tips with us. So thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much and stay safe.
Thank you.